it's almost like you're building, but the things you're building with are constantly adapting themselves. So everything is up for grabs all the time. Yeah. And there's a phrase I heard recently, which is like, it'll basically never be chill again. And I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Welcome to Orbit, the HG podcast series where we talk about some of the most successful leaders of technology businesses and hear how they built some of the most successful software companies across the world. I'm Amr Ellabban, Head of Data and AI at HG, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Des Traynor, co-founder and CSO of Intercom. Intercom's Fin is the first AI agent that delivers human quality customer support service. And Des spoke earlier today at this year's HG Digital Forum in Madrid on the subject of AI transformation in customer support. Des, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Maybe for listeners who don't know you, could you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. I'm from Dublin, Ireland. I kind of studied computer science, became a lecturer, attempted a PhD, dropped out. I met Owen, who's the CEO of Intercom. We had a consultancy together. We tried to have a side project. That didn't work as well as we had hoped, but in doing so, we discovered a bigger problem, which was internet businesses talking to their customers was a really hard thing to do in 2011. And we, together with Kieran and David, we launched Intercom, where I've been working ever since. My job at Intercom is primarily product, so all of product design and engineering, etc., all ultimately rolls up to me. And then on top of that, I deal with various other, kind of foundry level stuff, including podcasts. And like right now, 100% of my attention is on Fin, our AI agent that you mentioned at the start. That's like we've carved out a little sort of specific group who focuses entirely on Fin, and that's where I spend most of my days.
And we'll get into Fin in a minute, but can you share a little bit more about what that early journey was like, being a founder of a business and then growing it to the kind of scale that Intercom reached?
It was a lot of fun. It was pretty manic. I think you never really, our fundraising was initially, we did like 1 million, 5 million, 23, 35, 50, so, and then 125 or whatever. I think at every given point, every time you do something like, fundraising tends to be the moment where these things get punctuated, and it always feels like both an achievement and also a new target at the same time. So you're like, bank that, we've clearly done something, but now we have to do something even bigger again. It's like jumping from treadmill to treadmill, and they're all set on slightly higher speeds or slightly higher inclines. And it's a privilege to do the jump, but it's also, you have to be aware of what you're doing. And that's kind of like what the emotional side is like. It's like you're always just kind of feeling there's one more summit to climb. The other piece is just there's an all-encompassing aspect, which is things break all the time. People leave, leaders don't work out, functions are missing a leader. And so I would say, like, in my time at Intercom, I've led everything from the customer education team to the customer support team to marketing in general to product in general. I've bounced around quite a bit. You have this obligation of being a type of a fire person. Wherever you see there's a fire, you run towards it. And that's honestly like what happens a lot is like, oh, something's not working out, I better run towards that problem. When other people are maybe more inclined to detach themselves from it, you need to lean in harder. That's the other aspect. But lastly, I'd just say, you kind of, you start off very narrow. Like I started off identifying and thinking of myself just as a product manager or somebody who really cares about what we're building and, the art and craft of product management. And you just constantly get broader perspectives the whole way, where I watch podcasts of myself in 2013 where the most important thing in company building is scoping the right product or whatever. And I'm like, really? Because I just think you just constantly get and if you had to look at me in 2017, it would be it's LTV CAC. That's the thing that matters most. It's that iPhone camera feature where you can keep making it a broader and broader perspective. It just kind of feels like that, where it's I used to think about, where does this feature fit within a product? And now it's much more where does this business fit within a landscape? Perpetually zooming out, I guess. And
Sure.
The tail end of that is you end up being one of these slightly more abstract people that I would have hated when I was 30,
But I guess it gives you that broader perspective to be able to understand the whole business.
Yeah, totally.
And
And
kind of
I think
impact.
I do a bit of angel investing as well, and it certainly helps from that perspective, because you realize some things aren't uniquely Intercom. They're generic, and then there's other things that we're just flat out missing that we need to learn from. Because I've seen companies where go hyper viral, or I've seen companies where all they cared about was product and it didn't work, whatever. You see, kind of the nice thing about angel investing is you learn you learn lessons on other people's companies too, you know.
What are maybe some of the lessons that you've learned from other people's companies that you've brought back to Intercom?
I think knowing where your product stops is probably one of the most important. Like, I mean, I've invested in like just a few different companies in this category, like Superhuman, the email client,
Yeah.
Equals is an AI powered spreadsheet, are two examples where like they have pretty clear guardrails, as in we don't go further than X or whatever. And I think just the nature of Intercom, the way we started was it was like a communication channel for internet business to talk to their customers. And it was really hard to draw a bounding box and be like, no, we won't do a sales conversation. No, we won't do a marketing conversation. You know, the temptation is always like, well, it's customers want to build it, you know, like,
Just keep on
whereas,
adding
yeah,
more to it. Yeah.
whereas I have genuinely seen there are probably more examples where I've seen some companies do really well just by saying no. There's no rational reason for it, but we draw the line here and we're going to be the best over here and we're not touching what's over there. There's merit to that approach. And then like, but I will say I'm also an investor in Miro or Notion, where they've kind of just broadened and broadened, right? Like, and I can see that how that works too, but they do it perhaps more through M&A than they do through like internal, how do you say, dilution of strategy or whatever.
You mentioned in your talk a moment in 2022 that was pretty transformative for you. It would be great if you could kind of share that in your own words.
Everyone will remember where they were when they first heard of ChatGPT, I think, especially if you work in tech. I think it was like November 30th, 2022. And I was sitting in my kitchen having Thanksgiving dinner, I think. And I just, like, you know, as you do, like, I turned my phone up and I saw like the little Slack icon with like 11 updates. And I was like, oh, goody. And the most poignant one was from Fergal, who's our VP of AI. And he said something like, have you seen this? And he linked up like chat dot whatever, openai.com or whatever the link was back then. So I had a little play with it. And I was like, oh yeah, because we had been partners with OpenAI for quite a while. So we were playing with the OpenAI Playground, which is the previous version of this. And Playground was the ability to expand or finish the sentence. And it was pretty impressive, but like still no obvious application, just kind of like a very much a, that's cool type product. But this was definitely quite different in both the AI, but also honestly, I think the UX of ChatGPT at the time doesn't get enough credit either. You know, the next thing I think I got an iMessage from Kieran, our chief engineer, and he was just like, have you seen this? And I was like, something's going around. So I met Fergal the following morning at 10 a.m. and we kind of, you know, he just gave me his take. I rang Owen, our CEO, that evening. I think it was Friday night. And I basically said, like, look, everything I'm seeing and everything that Fergal's saying, are like, I think we need to like make a swing here. And obviously our strategy on the Wednesday of that week was like not to like bet the whole company on AI, because AI hadn't happened yet, right? So I was like, you know, I think we need to change it. And I will say that this is it's a really important moment to have like a founder level CEO, because it's such a risky conviction bet that Owen was willing to make, which was just like, obviously he did his own research, but was like, let's do it. I think that's like, I can imagine, and I've seen a lot of companies struggle where there's a bit more, where they adopted more of a wait and see type policy, which is just a bit more cautious, just a bit more like, what will the investors say or whatever, you know. Whereas we made the decision, I think we started work on Monday to like go hard on AI, and like, I think like 15 days later, we had our first features live, and we got a lot of credit. I remember like we shared some links to and some GIFs or some videos, and Mark Andreessen and all sorts of folks shared it to the internet. They're like, and at the time, it was cool because it was, for us, it was planting a flag that like there is an AI revolution happening and we're now in it, you know. I think a lot of our competitors have only in the last 6 months or so like said the same things that we were saying in like January 2023.
Sure.
But that was the moment, and obviously like there's a lot to it because you're kind of canceling roadmaps. For starters, you're saying, hey, all those features that we were going to build to make us even more competitive with Zendesk, they're not coming. We're going to build this other thing that no one's asking for, but it's really important, you know. And that it's there's a lot of change you go through, and you have to go through it extremely fast in order to be competitive. But it was probably the single biggest sort of like move now or like forever hold your seats type of moment. Like, as if we didn't actually get there, we were going to be in trouble trying to sell seats in 2025 or whatever,
And it's really interesting, right? Because we discuss a lot internally at HG, the kind of innovator's dilemma for a lot of incumbents of, to your point, how do you give up this BAU roadmap, this plan that has been baked in for a long time, and kind of carve out the resource to go and attack this new AI problem with conviction. Obviously, you touched on kind of having a founder, CEO able to kind of take that decision boldly. Was there anything else in terms of how your organization had been set up before this that helped you pivot so easily?
We had previously invested in AI. The fact that we had a VP of AI, well, it wasn't a VP at the time, the years have been kind to him. But we had an AI leader, Fergal, and we had built an AI product, Resolution Bot. We had prior experience here, and we knew where we were at, and we knew what was and wasn't working. So we were able to appraise the breakthrough quickly. I think that was really important. We also kind of like, Owen and I would be like students of Clay Christensen. We were very aware of the innovator's dilemma, and we're very aware of like people giving it the whole blockbuster thing of like, well, we have stores in every city. Surely that will help us stand up against Netflix. You have to have a very good intuition for what's cope and what's reality. And it's easy to convince yourself these seats are going to stick around forever, or like versions of that. Like we've been here before, people promised us AI for years. So I think like the ingredients of the kind of rapid pivot, I think are both like at CEO level and then just at tooling enablement level. Like, so we actually had an AI team ready to jump and actually able to produce the stuff. There's a few little fortuitous things. We happened to be planning a rebrand anyway, so it gave us a chance to change how we were branding. We happened to be planning to change our pricing and packaging anyway, so it gave us a chance to reconsider how pricing should work in a post-AI era. We were one of the first, I think possibly the first, to move to this like outcome-based pricing of like, so Fin charges like $1 per successful resolution. The biggest sort of, how to say, discussion is like, well, if someone cancels their seat and just uses Fin, then you're going to lose all that seat revenue. And I'm like, we're losing that seat revenue anyway. Like long term, the seats are going. So you have to just accept that and embrace that reality. And then separately, you then have other conversations like, hey, we were charging $80 a seat. Do we think that person sitting in that seat does more than 80 successful resolutions? And if so, do we think we can replicate their resolutions with Fin? And if so, if it's more than 80, we're actually up on this one. For sure, the whole thing might shrink because the salaries go down, etc. But this should be cheaper for the business and actually more profitable for us if we do it right. So we had to like bake all that in to pop out what became our like resolution-based pricing. And at the time, if you remember, like AI is quite expensive as well. So it's down probably several factors since then.
So I think it's down 1000x since that.
Perhaps, yeah, and it's no, and there is a Jevons paradox thing here in that the cheaper it gets, the more of it we use to be better. So like, it's not, we're dialing it up as well. Like generally speaking, I think the freedom to have movement in all of these approaches, how we sell, how we price, how we market, how we build, what we build, where we build, our product strategy, like every single one of those things was deeply affected by AI. I've seen firsthand through either our competitors or incumbents in the market, when you're like locked up in like multi-year roadmaps and you're, maybe beholden to public markets and having to explain yourself all the time, you start to like, you have way less ability to pivot the joints, so like, and like all those things are connected, right? Like as in, you can't just change what you build and expect everything else to be the same. You now need to explain AI and price AI. So like all of these things need to move together. And I saw a lot of folks try to move them one by one, which is why I think a lot of people strategically get stuck in Copilot because they were able to intellectually kind of grok, well, we can stick a tenor on a seat and we're done. But actually, that's not how you're going to position yourself to do work for people. You're going to augment work, but the bigger change here involves everything. It involves changing what you sell, how you sell, what your performance metrics are, what your differentiators are. Everything has to change. So, and if you think about like Michael Porter has this framework of an activity mapping of like, hey, how like all of a business has to fit together, right? So if you take, say, Southwest or take Ryanair, right, like these low-cost airlines, their model, the same reason they don't do a full meal service is the same reason they turn the planes around in 15 minutes, is the same reason that they can do low fares, right? All of those things are connected. Gotcha. Similarly, what you sell, why you sell, how you price for it, how you differentiate, they're all connected. So you can't iterate on these things one at a time.
It has to be a whole company transformation.
It's a whole company transformation, I think, and that's scary as hell, right? So as a result, a lot of people try to dip their toe by making little incremental nudges along the way, whereas in practice, you need to be like, right, let's redesign the company around AI.
And what was that journey like for you at Intercom, right? Because I guess you must have had to transform your sales teams, your own support teams. What was that journey like? How did you bring people along with you?
Owen had returned to the company and we had already like, planned. He had like a plan for what we called P52, which was a plan to kind of like basically, refound the company is the best way I could describe it. He'd probably have better words. It's almost like we already had all the floorboards up, so it's easy to fix everything at once, if you know what I mean, right? Metaphorically or whatever. So it was a case of like and then like later on, like say the likes of like our CPO Paul or me or Fergal or whatever, going around and making sure like everything is consistent and everything works together. We had just done a reduction in force. We were changing our pricing. We were like, everything was already in a fluid state. Everyone was already prepped for like a significant wave of changes. So in some degree, it was like fortuitous that it happened like when it did. Had it happened like say 6 months later, we might have been like halfway through a new strategy and had to throw it away, and that might have been harder. I still think we probably could have done it, but yeah, there was something useful about the fact that no one was married to anything at the time. Whereas I think if we had it like, if we'd already made these broad commitments to customers or to the market or to investors, whatever, I think that would have like locked down our freedom a lot.
Maybe bringing it back to Finn and sport for a second. One of the things you talked about earlier today was how you view kind of AI starting out as augmenting what people do. You talked about co-pilots just now, but then doing chunks of someone's work and then eventually kind of doing a whole job. And we had Russell Kaplan, one of the founders of Cognition, talking about Devon in a similar kind of way for software engineering. Assuming this kind of plays out over time, that means kind of really significant changes to how some of these organizations are structured for, well, all kinds of businesses. How do you think about that in the long run?
I think it's going to be like the largest change in how labor is applied in most businesses. I mean, there will be some businesses that won't be affected directly, but but I think most will. And like software engineering orgs will change. You're seeing a lot the rise of these like 20-person companies doing hundreds of millions of revenue or whatever. So I think like the nature, the ROI of any one individual should be a lot higher. I think in customer support, it's pretty obvious. Like if 60, 70, 80% of the support volume has disappeared, it's unlikely the support org is going to be the same size on the far side of that. Now, as to whether or not they stay in the company, we're seeing genuine variance here. It's not like everyone's just like, having widespread rifts. Oftentimes support teams are like understaffed anyway. So actually what they get to is a right sizing. Sometimes we're seeing people realize that like, hey, now that we're dealing with all the like the low hanging fruit and all of the like the recurring scenarios, whether it's refunds or like change requests or whatever, now we can work on customer success. And all of a sudden you see a reinvestment in like, rather than being there when things go wrong, how do we have a team that makes sure things go right? So you're seeing like different approaches depending on the industry, depending on the pressure on margins, etc. But I think in general, like the pattern of AI, I think if I describe it in 3 steps, in practice it's a spectrum, but I'll call out 3 steps. Step 1 was augmenting humans for what they were already doing and just making them more productive. And the stats we see are like with our own Copilot, which helps an agent answer support questions. We see about a 30% increase in productivity in terms of just raw throughput of handling time or whatever. They just get through more stuff. And that results in like you needing less agents, obviously. The next step is probably where Finn is. Finn's somewhere between the second and third step here, which is like doing a significant chunk of somebody's job. So not augmenting them doing it, but just doing it for them. And that means like, hey, you never have to handle this type of thing again. And then the final step will be like, Finn, in Finn's case, will be like Finn as a complete frontline sort of agent. There's a ways to go there. Both we're obviously building it, but like there's a ways to go in other parts of like, say, CS orgs need to work at what does the world look like when that's the case. I think you can map those 3 scenarios to like most areas. So you've got like, say, like helping engineers to like doing a whole chunk of engineering, for example, maybe like standing classes up or like, writing tests or maybe handling all bugs or something like that, all the way through to like, Devon as both your senior principal engineer and your CTO or whatever. I believe on some time frame we'll get there, and you'll see the same in creative, like helping people design to creating designs. Like I'll tell you one funny example that made me realize this framework exists was last July. I think I received a pitch to invest in a company, and what they did was they were really good at using AI to help you write outbound sales emails.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, cool, I get it. That problem makes sense. It's augmenting a human doing the thing they're doing. And then like Wednesday off that week, I got another pitch, and the pitch was, hey, You just give us the email addresses and we will find a person, look them up, write the email and send the email. And I was like, ooh, that's now doing that. A chunk of SDR work is now being handled by this company. And if they succeed, no one needs the former company, right? And I was like, okay, so your checkbook's out. This is the one. And then on the Friday of that week, I got a third pitch, which was, you tell us what type of customers you need and we'll do the rest. And I was like, huh? And they're like, yeah, you tell us the profile, the buyer, like the industry, and we're going to do the sourcing, do the scraping, the Zoom info stuff, the LinkedIn lookups, whatever it is. We'll find out who it is you need to talk to. We'll look them up. We'll find out what's the right email for them. We'll send them the email. We'll handle all the follow-up. We'll get them into your calendar. And I was like, huh, if they win, then you don't need the former two, right? And now the interesting thing is the team pitching me on the Monday, I had max confidence they could build the product. Yeah. The team on the Friday, I had least confidence, but if they did win, they were winning everything, you know. And I think that's the framework of AI is how I think about it. Like we should assume AI is going to get really good, even from where it is today. And because of that, we should assume we're going to end up high and to the right. The only question is one of time horizons. And I often tell the story internally of the Sony MiniDisc, right? The MiniDisc was a beautiful product. You might have had one. I certainly did. And for like 11 years, the MiniDisc was the best product in the space. And then in 2003, it's gone. And the MiniDisc wrapped up and it's never existed since. And this is like during times of this technological upheaval, these transitory products can emerge, which is, so MiniDiscs, I feel like they had a silent assumption that I guess that like SSDs would never get good enough to be portable and they'd overheat or whatever. You know, they had all these assumptions that would say the iPod should never have existed. And then one day the iPod existed and then the entire like ground assumptions of the thing disappeared. And I think there's a lot of mini discs being built in the AI space right now because whether they know it or not, they're carrying a couple of assumptions of things that will never happen that in the quiet corners of Anthropic or OpenAI are actually happening pretty well and pretty reliably. And I think that's the danger here, is that you end up building a product that is like perfect for a moment in time. Yeah. And it's a difficult thing to avoid.
And I think that's a really interesting one, because we saw certainly in 22 and 23, even into 24, some products kind of briefly appearing on the market that were, I guess, a thin wrapper around ChatGPT. And we should come back to the topic of thinner and thicker wrappers. I know you touched on it earlier, but how, on your journey of building Fin, how many times did you see, hey, we've built this feature, and then 6 months later, an Anthropic release has just kind of superseded the need for that functionality?
I believe it's happened a few times. I think a lot of the, I can't say authoritatively, Fergal will be the best person to answer, but I know that like our earliest Fin architectures, if you like, made assumptions about the models that could or couldn't do certain things, or ultimately that we had to protect them against certain scenarios, that as they advanced became less important. And as a result, you know, when you realize, hey, we actually, you know, perhaps you can imagine like a step we might need to hedge against a bad outcome might become less necessary. And every step costs money and adds latency or whatever. So you end up kind of constantly re-architecting. Like I think Fin's architecture is a constant work in flight, depending on model capability. And then we run like, at any given point, we're running like hundreds of A/B tests of various different versions and iterations of Fin, because we're constantly still optimizing. Like we're like Fin's percentage resolution average keeps going up month over month. But that's not because we're sitting here with our hands off the wheel. It's because we're like, the AI team specifically are like constantly iterating, like trying out new things. What if we didn't need this? What if we merged this with that? What if we separated those two things? Could we get higher performance? Like no one yet knows the optimal architecture for any of these products. And I think you end up trying things and maybe they make sense at a moment in time. And then, you know, like a better model comes out and you don't need it as much. And that's just, as long as you're willing to adapt and react. I think the biggest thing I'd say is building an AI product is not the same as, like, you know, let's say you say, hey, you and me are going to go build a payroll product. We can probably make some hard, firm assumptions about what code can do and what, you know, how Ruby on Rails works or whatever it is, Python. It's almost like you're building, but the things you're building with are constantly adapting themselves. So everything is up for grabs all the time. Yeah. And There's a phrase I heard recently, which is like, it'll basically never be chill again. And I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah, and I think that's really true, and we see it with kind of many of the companies in the portfolios. It's that agility and ability to adapt to those changes in the ecosystem that's becoming
Yeah,
almost the competitive advantage that you have
absolutely. Yeah.
in this kind of new world. One thing, maybe bringing it back to the point that kind of support orgs are going to need to change as kind of Fin gets better and kind of the customer support, customer experience space changes a lot. We're seeing the same on software engineering. I kind of bring it back to that point you made about this journey is a whole company transformation. It's not one function in isolation. What advice would you give to business leaders in terms of navigating these changes with their own internal organizations?
It's most important to be really clear that it's going to happen. Like a lot of folks, their first reaction is some version of cope, or potentially task minimization, if you know what I mean, right? They're like, I know that he says this, but really all he needs is this other thing. And before you know it, like your call for like a radical reorg or whatever, gets turned into, well, Joey's going to join the AI group. And you're like, no, 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 sorry. How did this get so heavily diluted along the way? It's a well-spirited intention, but ultimately, I don't think it's an option right now. So I think the first piece of advice I would probably offer is you need to be really clear with your senior leadership team or like the team beneath you or whatever, like, hey, the only acceptable outcome here is radical reorganization or whatever the changes you need to make is. We're going to build a new product. We're going to change how our product's built, or we're going to hire new people or fire new people or whatever. You need to be really clear that the outcome can't arrive heavily diluted, because that's the default for any sort of significant move in a larger company. And then I think you need buy-in, and then I think you need an execution plan, and I just don't think you've got time. Like the temptation again, like basically, it's a tough thing, and like it's tough for all levels. Like it's not like the CEO gets the easy job, or it's not like or like as one down from the CEO. It's not like I get the easy job of just being like haha alakazam. Like the reality is the reality. The market will correct every company that doesn't accept this new reality, and because of that, it's just a case of like making sure you react correctly for what's best for the business, and not what's like, how do you say, most convenient, or what's like least amount of drama or trauma or whatever. The challenge very firmly is we have to make a significant change. We have to make it very soon, and we have to make it in full. And you then need everyone who's going to be on the executional arm of that change to understand, accept, defend, believe in that change. And you need them to communicate that change, whatever it might be. The way this goes wrong, I know what I'm saying sounds kind of slightly abstract and fluffy, and of course, duh, that's just running a company. But like, there's a difference between like, hey folks, our expense tracking thing is basically dead because everyone can build it overnight. The OCR stuff we spent 8 years building, anyone can build in a weekend. The Rails app that surrounds it, anyone can build in a weekend. We have no sustainable differential advantage in the market. Our only hope is to have the best AI-based expense tracking thing. Okay. So we need to like basically gut our existing product team, pivot them to AI, and launch this new product, and it needs to be live in the market in 6 months. And that's going to mean nights and weekends, and it's going to mean hard work and all sorts of stuff. Okay. These are like tough messages, but like what will happen if you don't really like kind of fight for it, and if the team beneath you doesn't fight for it, what will genuinely happen is people will say, I know Des says that expense tracking is dead, but he doesn't really mean that. What he means is like, we should really have some AI features. And to do that, we're going to borrow our 2 weakest engineers from XYZ team. They're going to go over here. They're going to tinker away with OpenAI. And like in 3 months' time, we might have a better OCR thing, but we don't know. It's cool. But like, look, Des, we got it. We're on it. That's the default kind of reaction until people accept the like gravity of the situation. There's a great paper called Situational Awareness that I think everyone in AI has read at this stage. That if you just Google situational awareness, you'll find it. But I think it's kind of it speaks to the reality of the situation that's unfolding in front of us, and that like, again, the thing I think that's hardest to land with so many folks is still people today. It shocks me who think of like this AI thing as being an optional cherry on top of their existing business. They're like, yeah, we're doing great in like payroll software, expense track. I'm making companies that I don't know anything about. They think that like, oh, if we can do a bit of AI on top, that'd be great. Maybe let's get another $5 on the seats. Like I screamed till I'm blue in the face. Like I'm like, it's not a cherry on top. It's not a side quest. It's the only game that matters. And also the thing you think it's going to be on top of doesn't exist either. So maybe it's a cherry, but it's not on top of anything. You know, like literally you either will win in this game or you will die in the old game. There is no alternative. This is like, there's like you on one side, like I can pitch it both ways for what's worth. I can say, great news, there's an opportunity to build a multi-billion-dollar disruptive business in a new exciting area, and we're at the forefront of technology. Isn't that exciting to work on? And then some people respond to that. Other people respond to fear, in which case I say, great news, we're all going to die. Our company's going to die. Our product no longer matters. All the stuff we spent like years building, irrelevant. Would you like to be a part of the future? You know, because the only game in town now is this new thing. We have to build that. But like, what do you like, the fear, or you like the kind of the optimism? It doesn't really matter. It's like you know, like that Avengers thing of Thanos. Like, you know, you tried everything else, and where did that lead you? Back to me. I am inevitable. Like, this change is inevitable. So like, the question is, are you going to be a part of it or not?
Fantastic. And on that note, thank you, Des, for joining us. It's been a really great conversation.
Cool.
Look forward to the next one.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to Orbit, the HG podcast. If you'd like to find out more about HG and our work building enterprises that endure, subscribe to our monthly update at hgcapital.com/monthly-update.